In another cruel twist of fate, which is both surprising and a little bit depressing, one rookie might be about to eat up another rookie whilst chugging down some mate. Because, oh yeah, that Franco Colapinto kid? Yep, he's back. All at the whim of an old Italian man seeking to repeat what he did to a young German boy back in the early 90s. Oh wow, that really sounds bad when you say it out loud. The news is swirling around Argentinian outlets and social media right now that Franco Colapinto is about to be brought back into F1 with the Alpine stable of drivers, and that it could happen any moment now. In fact, it might have already happened, and if it did happen whilst you were watching this video, maybe drop down a like, because I think many people amongst the F1 fandom is going to like this. After many weeks of quiet speculation and some spy photos from the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix of Franco's manager and Flavio Briatore discussing matters in a somewhat light-hearted manner, the consensus seems to be that Franco is destined to be coming back to F1 sooner rather than later. However, due to the end of 2024 not exactly going the Argentinians' way and it ending on a bit of a whimper, many people were speculating that most likely, Colapinto would be going back to Formula 2 with additional Williams monetary backing, or maybe spending some time behind the scenes doing some private testing in the FW45 to get his game back up and really prepare himself to become the third driver of Williams, the third driver, instead of Williams relying on Mercedes drivers. I mean, to be fair, having mentors like Carlos and Alex nearby you, that's not too bad. But in a sudden and dramatic fashion, things are looking likely to point toward the biggest surprise of 2024 returning in 2025 as Alpine's third and reserve driver, at the expense of pretty much everyone else in the Alpine fold, including the likes of their latest recruit, Paul Aron. So all of those other Alpine Academy stars, Gabriele Mini, Victor Martin, Krushmine, yeah, them getting into Formula 1 now, that's pretty much gone, dead as a dodo, quite frankly. And that in of itself is incredibly unfair. I feel for all those kiddos, their chances of being in Formula 1 completely denied. And then all the while, Oscar Piastri's probably looking from the sidelines going like, yeah, told you. But throughout all this, I think we can quite clearly tell who really wears the trousers around Enston. It's not Oliver Oakes at all. Because Briatore has confirmed that talks between Alpine and Franco's team had continued in the background, with Briatore saying that it'd be wrong to not have a chat with drivers who have shown glimpses of being fast in F1 machinery, and that the only certainties in life are the fact that death comes around. So contracts, they can be broken. And may I remind you that this is not the first time that Flavio has been playing fast and loose with contracts, because may I remind you, Benetton snapping up Michael Schumacher from Jordan after just one Grand Prix weekend, that was incredibly surprising. Michael Schumacher only qualified at the Belgian Grand Prix. He barely made the start of lap 1 before his clutch broke out when he qualified in 7th. And yet Flavio decided to take a punt on him anyway. Same goes for Fernando Alonso. His first season at Minardi wasn't all that electric. He was impressive, but that caused Briatore to snap him up to make him the test and reserve driver at Renault for 2002 for him to make his full-time F1 debut the following year. He has taken a punt on many talented drivers, so with Colapinto, he's actually got more evidence because the kid scored points. And I bet that move of Michael to go to Benetton, that certainly made Nigel Mansell smile, pushing Nelson Piquet out into retirement. So he's, oh yes, Michael, that's a good lad. Cheers to you, son. Because Nelson and Nigel, they did not get on. So yeah, a similar strategy could be on the cards for Colapinto, or according to some rumours and reports, it could happen a fair bit sooner than 2026, perhaps even after Miami. And the main source of this latest fuel for the Colapineta, that's a local term by the way for the Franco hype train, is that from the Argentinian news outlet Ole. They've been keeping a beady eye over any trace of new information concerning Franco, who brought points back to Argentina for the first time since 1982, with the outlet reporting the awaiting of Franco's A-Day, expected to be Thursday, January the 9th, although delays could be privy to happen. I mean, that does seem a little bit coincidental for my taste, but I thought I would point it out to you anyway. And besides, there's plenty of other information and evidence to look through and yap on about ad nauseum, because I find this entire story really fascinating and also all the more tragic because of what it will mean for Jack Doohan. By the way, for those of you thinking that I want him to fail and be crashing out of Alpine, you would be wrong, because I think he's earned it, but Franco, that is a force that very few rookies can ever hope to push back. And throughout all of this, I bet Alex Albon is breathing a huge sigh of relief. Granted, Franco isn't racing for Williams in 2025, but his presence would have been felt as the original plan was to make him their reserve for that year, because if Franco stuck to the plan that Williams had in mind for him, he would be a constant presence in the F1 Williams garage. Him just there, watching, waiting, just in case Alex were to stumble against Carlos. A fact that was all too clearly shown to us all with the many cuts to Liam Lawson when Daniel Ricciardo or Yuki Tsunoda made a mistake. And another thing that would be making me think that he would be sticking around Williams is that Globant and Mercado Libre would still be Williams sponsors, but they seem to be missing now. According to the likes of TN.com, they pointed out that neither company is listed anymore as a sponsor with Williams, which is really a surprise. Because even though Robert Kubica didn't race for Alfa Romeo when he was their reserve driver, the Polish-based Orlen logo was still on the car, and then proving incredibly stubborn, with their shade of red clashing with the luscious red of Alfa Romeo. Ugh. And another thing that Ole pointed out to all of us is a social media post from Franco Colapinto's father, an Instagram story, which, as we all know, deletes itself after 24 hours, so it was a bit of a blink or you will miss it type thing. But thankfully, Ole and then Planet F1 were able to report and then convey what was actually shown. It showed Franco Colapinto's dad with a Williams shirt on with a caption reading, "There are a few of us who already know everything. Here's to F1 2025. While also raising his glass in cheers. Now, I know what you're going to be saying. Oh, come off it, Law. You can't just go off of that thing as well, or that alone, because we all saw what happened with Checo's dad going around social media, claiming that journalists were lying about his son's future in the sport, and that he would be around Red Bull racing for 2025. Yes, that is something to consider. But it just really feels like something's going on behind the scenes, that maybe Franco Colapinto's Formula One story isn't quite over yet. There are far more clues pointed toward the Argentinian being on the books for Alpine, and that the team themselves are keen to move away from Renault as their primary backer. But the French company would remain as a minority stakeholder, just like they did in 2011 when Lotus became their new name and brand. It would be foolish not to be involved at all, because after all, Briatore did say in another interview via GrandPrix.com that Renault still wants to win, and the French want to win, and it will do whatever it takes to win, even if it means that they give up their rights as a power unit supplier and they basically get into bed with Mercedes. As long as they have some kind of financial hand in the game, that would count. And what makes me really think that anybody who is associated with the Alpine Academy doesn't stand a hope in hell in being promoted after Jack Doohan got his chance right at the last minute. He got it by the skin of his teeth. There's also the addition of another reserve driver. It seemingly is coming from the everyman of Formula One at the moment, Ryo Hirakawa, who did duties for McLaren, then did some stuff with Haas at the Abu Dhabi Young Driver Test, and now is locked in as one of the reserve drivers of Alpine. Because people thought that he would be going to Haas, what with his connections to Toyota, with their endurance program. But much like with Paul Aron's unexpected arrival as another Alpine reserve, I think there is a far bigger plan going on behind the scenes to rebuild the Alpine team from the ground up, and with far less involvement from Renault, and it becoming high-tech. Now, for those of you who are regular watchers, you know where I'm going to be going right now, but for anyone who is new, well, first of all, welcome. My belief is that Alpine will no longer be called that after 2025. Instead, it will become High-Tech Grand Prix, and the addition of Hirakawa as one of their reserves is just yet another red flag that is pointing out to me it's going to happen. It's just I don't need this from without. I know in my heart of hearts that this is yet another clue. Because you only got to look what Toyota's been doing in the background, irrespective of what they're doing with Haas. They've struck up a partnership in the European Formulae with High-Tech. Because if you noticed in the F2 entry list, High-Tech isn't called High-Tech Pulse 8 anymore. It's now High-Tech TGR. So having Rio at Alpine is a clear sign of the transition picking up pace. Although I do still find it weird that Ritomo Miyata is not racing for High-Tech TGR, he's racing for ART, but I suppose that contract was signed up before this alliance actually took hold a couple of weeks ago, so there was no time to change it. If Miyata has another year in F2 in 2026, then he'll probably move to High-Tech. And then you might be thinking, well, wait a minute, why isn't he at Haas then? Well, if you think about it, they don't really have the finances to be able to run old cars and then have their own test team to be able to provide Hirakawa extra time in those cars. No, Alpine do. They have plenty of old F1 machinery to be able to use, because that's what they did with Piastri, that's what they did with Doohan, so they will afford that to the likes of Aaron and now then Hirakawa. And then I'm pretty sure that Colapinto will get a few runs around it as well. So I just thought I would point out that chestnut for anyone thinking, nah, Law, that news on January 9th, that was for Rio, not Franco. We can still have both. Yeah, all of this indicates to me that the dependence on Renault for power, people and profits, it's diminishing hard. And that signing on Franco is something that is not completely impossible, that the team has in its sights next as a means to motivate its current lineup. That being Pierre Gasly and Jack Doohan. Now, of course, the management over at Alpine are doing their best to at least look like they are trying to give both drivers a fair shot. They are half-heartedly saying, look, we believe in a meritocracy. Both drivers have to perform at their best if they hope to have a long-term future with this team. Pierre has to perform and Jack has to perform. It's all equal. But let's be real here. That sentiment is really aimed toward Jack Doohan. Pierre Gasly, he's absolutely assured that role as the team's leader for as long as he wants it, and as long as none of the other top teams have any room for him. And realistically, the turnaround of Alpine has been really, really impressive in the second half of 2024 to make it look like that Gasly, he's actually got a place which isn't too bad and it might suit him. Jack's hiring was born out of necessity the way I see it. Ever since Bruno Faman stoked the fires under Esteban Ocon, threatening the sack before the Canadian Grand Prix, and then even under Briatore, he was talking about Ocon being demotivated, even after his second place finish in Brazil, and him shifting his focus seemingly toward Haas, and then that was at the wrong time for Alpine, who were close to surprisingly matching their 6th place 2023 placement. However, one key facet that Briatore forgets to point out is that there was a clear difference between the car that Ocon raced and the car that Gasly raced, because Gasly was staying, Ocon was going. So why give him the latest parts, which was made really evident thanks to Ted Kravitz on Sky Sports, that Ocon and Gasly had two completely different nose cones, Gasly having the faster one, and that was why he was able to flirt with the top 5, whereas Ocon could barely get himself off the back. So yeah, that whole differential in terms of performance and pace and priority, it really makes me think that Alpine right now are very much trying to get rid of every single bit of Renault influence they can, so just eject Ocon, barely give Doohan any time. The Alpine Academy drivers, good luck with that one. Instead, putting Colapinto, Hirakawa, Aaron, all these people, even the F1 Academy is not safe because they've now got somebody in there, their own Alpine Academy. Hitech's coming in as an F1 Academy team, so there's now 6. It's all really making it clear. Hitech is coming. You cannot stop it. I am prepared to die on this ladder regarding this. And in Franco's case, this could open the door for him to become Pierre Gasly's teammate from as early as Imola onwards, should Jack Doohan not perform during the flyaway races. You get the sense that the deal with the Australian was done super early in the year because of the flashpoint of Monaco, and then Franco comes along, he actually shows what he can do, and Flav is like, aw, damn. And even though Flavio Briatore has been very open about saying that feelings do not exist in Formula One and that emotions should not get the better of you regarding really important decisions, such as trying to make Alpine an actually viable competitive team, which they weren't at the beginning of 2024, it's a real torn situation for him because Jack Doohan is one of his drivers that he manages closely. So in a way, you can actually say that maybe he was showing a bit of favoritism, because if Jack weren't part of his stable of Formula One talent, upcoming and all that, then probably Jack would have been cast aside even earlier. Colapinto would already have that deal in his pocket. Instead, what we got now is that he's just got to wait around a little bit. But even with that bone being thrown in the Australians' direction, I really fear that the targets that are expected of him are going to be insanely unfair. I wouldn't be surprised if the only thing that will keep Jack around all the way through 2025 is that he is within a tenth of Pierre Gasly, or maybe matching Pierre, or ideally, even better, be faster than Pierre, although I don't really see that happening at the beginning of the year. Alpine want to really match 6th place at the very least, ideally even trying to beat Aston Martin. And right now, Jack is being given a chance, but it's not going to be a very long one. And that, again, is really, really unfair. But sometimes F1 can be unfair. So in my own cynical mind, I'm really not surprised that Alpine will come up with some kind of lame or really bizarre excuse in dropping Jack. Something going on, they'll come up with something. Because what's become very clear is that the tolerance for mistakes amongst the rookies have become incredibly small. Borderline zero tolerance even. Franco is included as well. He is not immune from this, as it was made evident from his troubled final 3 races for Williams. And what has become clear is that Briatore, throughout all of this, those final 3 races with all of those crashes, he didn't care about all of that stuff. He was already impressed enough with what Franco was able to do from Monza onwards, and then scoring all of those points in Baku. Right then, when he was thrown into the deep end, he was able to swim Franco. But then unfortunately, Williams did a Williams thing in having a car that could be barely driven at the limit, and when you go through that limit, it's going to eject you at record speed and with an incredible amount of damage. And as a result, the wider world outside of Argentina definitely cooled in its regard toward Colapinto, including the likes of Red Bull, who were kind of interested in him, but then after all those crashes, they completely lost interest, and therefore didn't really find the rumoured $20 million price tag all that worth it. And then the term Crashapinto was thrown around a bit around some circles, him going from hero to zero. But come on, just think about it. Ever since the beginning of Williams' dark age in 2019, has there been a single driver of theirs who has not had some kind of serious or multiple amounts of crashes? George has had them, Robert has had them, Nicky Boy had them, Alex has had them, Logan has had them, Franco has had them. In fact, the only driver in the last 5 or 6 years who has not had any crashes whilst driving for Williams was that of Nick de Vries, who then went on to crash out of Formula 1 with a completely different team. The Williams car has been for many moons a notoriously tricky car to drive at the limit, and despite the team's efforts in 2024 to sacrifice top speed for downforce, that wasn't enough. More work needs to be done to allow its drivers to race at full pelt without fear of plunging it into the barriers without warning. The team needs it too for their own sake. Also, what makes me believe that all of these rumours and the speculation regarding Colapinto going over to Alpine is that James Vales has made it his mission to make sure that his junior charge, Franco, gets onto the F1 grid by any means necessary, even if it's not with Williams Racing. Because in reality, the Oxfordshire-based team, they've got 2 spots that they've filled with a solid pair of hands, and they all want to keep it that way for quite some time. So for the next 2 seasons, there is little hope of Franco getting into that team, unless either Alex or Carlos leaves after 2026 at the earliest. So 2 years waiting on the sidelines? No. Whereas, alternatively, with Alpine, he could be back as early as the summer. Because one of James Vales' main projects within his time in Formula 1, especially at Mercedes, is that his involvement with the junior side of things has been absolutely paramount. He was one of the founders of the Mercedes junior team, and now that he is in charge and inherited the Williams Academy, it's his pride and joy, effectively. And Franco is the Williams Academy's biggest success in quite a long time, if not ever, because he just came into Formula 1, even though he had a okay junior track record, and seemingly thought that, okay, I can make this work. And look at that, wouldn't you know it? He actually turns out to be really good when the Williams car actually has the current parts and is not having to actually beg Mercedes for scraps. And now James wants to emulate the Red Bull camp in spreading his seed up and down the grid. Oh god, that didn't translate well in being spoken out loud either. As well as maybe making a tidy sum along the way, because I know it would be foolish to get rid of Franco right now, because what if Carlos Sainz does leave? They would be between a rock and a hard place, unless they stumped it out for another outside driver, and therefore Vales would then undermine his own academy, which I don't think he would want to do. But right now, Williams does need money because, of their own crashes and instances, and also restoring itself to make it somewhat competitive and actually having relatively modern kit. It's a necessity, really. Franco came at the right time for them. Now, right now, Alpine needs cash as well, and whilst hiring Franco will be pricey, it's clear that, like at Williams, his sponsors, Globant and Mercado Libre, will be more than happy to stump up the monies to make up the difference if it means that their driver, who has taken the fandom by storm, gets back into the public eye again after his flirtations with it last year. Because if you think about it, Franco is fast, he has potential, he is popular, he comes with a lot of money and sponsors. He is the perfect rookie for any of the lower ranking teams to be able to get a bit of a leg up, because in 2025, And in 2026, it's going to be crucial to have the right investment, the right support, the right infrastructure, and ideally, the right drivers who have had some time to get themselves involved in the team and then be ready. If Colapinto does come in to replace Doohan, he will get the majority of the season and then ideally have about maybe 25 to 30 Grand Prix under his belt to then be ready for the new regulation cycle and pretty much be all guns blazing. And Briatore would ideally like him to stay with the team for a very long time, kind of like with Michael Schumacher when he signed him up for a good 5 seasons. The Alpine advisor has made it clear. He is there to get his Enstone team back to the front of the grid, and that there are no room for feelings like I mentioned earlier. Sure, Jack is one of his own crop of drivers, but that doesn't seem to be a factor in his own long-term prospects. It might have just given him, like I said, a few races to at least just give it a go. And even though I am not a fan of this choice, in the grand scheme of things, in the world of Formula One, it is a logical choice for a midfield team who has aspirations to not fall back into the backmarker status that it found itself in at the beginning of 2024, and ideally get past Aston Martin, and then sometimes be in touch of the top 4 teams, or maybe get back into the mix with them. Because the turnaround at Alpine has been notable, albeit not quite as big as McLaren's, because they have been basically copying the Woking team almost in every respect, from not only hiring David Sanchez to their fold, but to also copy their technical team layout and infrastructure, and acquiring more and more partners along the way, as well as investors. And they've gone as far as even recruiting the likes of Castor as their kit supplier, removing their long-term relationship with Kappa. So yeah, it's going to happen. Franco is going to join that team. Flav wants him. And the mountain that Jack has to climb has now not only surpassed the height of the likes of Mount Everest, it's now effectively the height of Olympus Mons. I wish you luck, Jack, but I don't think the team really has your best interests at heart. It's just such a shame. But at the same time, I'm glad that Franco's been giving a second chance and that people have not completely disregarded him entirely. I'm really in a bind here. Because I see you Argentinian and Australian fans, you are really present on this channel, and it's really difficult to try and maintain that balancing act, it really is. I want young drivers to thrive in the sport. I don't want one being sacrificed over the other, but Flav has just made it really, really difficult. It's really, really hard to like him outright. So the lineups for 2025 might not be locked in quite yet with Franco looming in the shadows, but what do I think of the other lineups? To find out which ones I rate from worst to best for this year, watch this video next, straight after this one.